Call the meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And we have one citizen request to speak. Call to the microphone, Maria Rudy, who lives in the Hudson School District.
Hello, thank you for opening this up tonight. I'm here to talk about school start times. In October 2016, the school district presented the findings of a survey sent to parents, teachers, staff, and community members about the school calendar. This survey also asked exploratory questions about school start times. 76.5% of respondents stated they wanted the school district to explore a change to the school start times. We are now nearly 3 years from that presentation of survey findings, and there has not been a conversation with parents, teachers, students, and the community about this issue. So I'm here today to ask that the school board take this issue on and begin the conversations with the community this summer. School start times for middle and high school students dictate when those kids need to get up in the morning to catch the bus, a ride, or walk to school. Well over a decade of research tells us that teenagers need at least 8 hours of sleep each night. And we also know that biologically their circadian rhythms change and they cannot fall asleep before 10 p.m., sometimes 11 p.m. at night. Currently, 2 out of 3 teenagers get less than 8 hours of sleep per night. Those teens that do not regularly get sufficient sleep are more likely to perform poorly in school and have lower academic success, suffer from depression, anxiety, and other mood disorders, engage in unhealthy risk behaviors such as drinking alcohol, including binge drinking, smoking tobacco, and illicit drug use. They have car crashes more frequently, and they do not get enough physical activity, leading to being overweight and an increase in type 2 diabetes. This research also shows that when schools delay start times, all of those risk behaviors are significantly reduced, demonstrating that school start times are a key influence in the physical, mental health, and academic success of students. Regarding mental health and well-being, we know this is a priority area for the district. Hudson, like other communities across the nation, is experiencing a dramatic increase in mental health conditions among our youth. We seek ways to help this through treatment and prevention. But we must also look at policy and system level changes that community and organizations can make that will positively impact all of our children. Addressing school start times by starting schools at 8:30 a.m. or later for all students K through 12 is the type of policy change we need to have that is positive and lasting, and impacting the health and well-being and academic success of our children. We understand that policy changes like these cannot happen overnight, and that is why we're asking for this conversation to start this summer now. We also understand that there are a number of stakeholders that need to be involved in this conversation, but we hope that the district will appropriately weight the impact and influence of those stakeholders, giving more weight to those impacted, meaning the students, families, and teachers. We know pushing school start times will have implications for our business community, but we have every confidence that the businesses in Hudson will continue to innovate and lead as they have when faced with other changes. And finally, we realize that the amount of sleep an individual student gets each night is also influenced by other factors, such as jobs they may have, other school activities, and also the use of phones and other devices. Those changes are influenced primarily by family policies and how their families are choosing the priorities, and that's where those decisions should reside. However, changing school start times resides with the school district, and that type of community level policy can help create a school system and environment that supports the positive health and well-being of students. So thank you.
Right. Thank you for your comments. And next up is superintendent's reports.
Okay. Let me just kind of pull it up here. and Tim can dig into this too at any point, but just wanted to give a little bit of an update. We did get the governor's budget. We had the governor's budget to start, then it turns into the House and Senate's budget, and then the governor gets to kind of go through line item veto and do some different things. And actually, the governor was pretty creative this year with the budget, and it actually helped us out quite a bit. And so I think it's on bottom page 3. You'll see where Hudson is at. Essentially, the governor's veto pen added about an extra $350,000 to our budget or state aid for this current fiscal year that we're in, and then another $212,000 in state aid the following year. And the biggest thing is the per pupil aid increase. And so originally, what the legislature had done is they had done 204 increase, but 25 of it came in the form of state aid. The other 179 came in the form of basically revenue limit or revenue ceiling type of thing. And so for those districts up against the revenue ceiling, that was great. For us, that would have just meant additional under levy at this point. And so obviously when we get per pupil aid, that helps us quite a bit in Hudson. And so you'll be able to kind of see through there. In the end, I think we are still going to be down aid from the state from previous years, right, Tim?
Yeah. Overall, we'll still be down. Yeah.
We'll still be down aid, so we're continuing to have to mitigate that by putting more on property taxes. I think over the last 4 or 5 years, we're down, $5, $6, $7 million in state aid, maybe more, and it just kind of continues to happen. Now, one of the things that could help us out coming up is, as the new developments come online, if we start to get some student growth, that definitely helps us. But when we just continue to get property growth and no real additional students, that's where we start to, take that nosedive in aid, because it, again, makes our district look more affluent and wealthier. And so therefore the state formula thinks that, the local should kick in more. But I think overall, as good a news as we could expect out of Madison, and feeling reasonably good about it. The governor's original budget would have had our aid increase go up $5-7 million, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
I mean, it would have been huge, and we knew that it was probably not a sustainable ask, but we were supportive of it. And I think at least this is a budget that's done before July 1st, that we kind of know what we're getting, we know where we can be. And then I think at the July work session, Tim has got a session on the preliminary budget.
Right. Yeah. We'll bring an update with the new numbers plugged in and some other additional things into that budget as part of our process going up to the annual meeting.
The big thing with legislation right now is because we have divided government, which we like, because that means things tend to move slow, and you tend to not have these knee-jerk reactions on either side. We don't have as much concern with bills that would maybe be more damaging, or what we perceive to be more damaging in public education, because you have a governor that's willing to veto them. And so not that you can totally let your guard down and not be vigilant, but I would say that it's a little bit calmer time, and there's nowhere near the amount of bills impacting us as there's been in the past years. So that is a good situation. Any questions about kind of where we're sitting as far as this legislative budgeting? When I originally put this on the agenda 2 weeks ago, I mean, it was kind of hot off the presses. This was a big deal, the way he was able to kind of wield the pen, because usually the state budget is the high water mark, and the governor can only reduce the amounts. But the way that he was able to do this is so there were some losers in this budget, because he did have to cut back spending in some of the other areas in order to supplement or to supplement the spending in K-12. And so one of the things that we always try to be cognizant of, and we talk to legislators, we understand that they have a really big picture, and we're one piece of the picture, and we have to be cognizant of that. Doesn't mean that we don't want to advocate for our area, but we also don't want to be completely unrealistic either as we go through these things. So, questions?
So is there any time period that the legislature, because there was some rumor that they were going to attempt to override the governor's veto, and you know, I haven't kept up with the soap opera that is the
No,
legislature. so-
the last I had heard is that the legislative leadership is just, they've gone home and they're fine with this. They thought it didn't in the end, it didn't exceed their dollar amount, their total budget dollar amount. So, I think from what I've been hearing is they're just kind of like, okay, that's one way to do it. Now there are some things, like I said, there are some things that got cut in order to fund this, and so that's always a challenge. But so it's set for 2 years, and we'll keep an eye on things. But I think what you'll see is it'll be pretty quiet for the most part, and then we have an election year coming up in a year, and I don't think usually they're not wanting to make too much of a leadership doesn't want their party one way or the other to stir the pot too much. So I don't anticipate too many controversial bills coming out of either side of the political spectrum going into an election year.
So no follow-up, because they were talking about some, I don't want to say drastic, but some clear substantive changes the way schools are funded. They had that task force that went on for multiple years, and now they're probably not likely to do anything given
Yeah,
they're
I
facing
mean,
an election year.
it's facing an election year, and I think the biggest issue they have with that is how do you hold people harmless? Because it's in order to revamp the system, you either have to hold people harmless or you're going to end up with winners and losers in the system. So, for example, if they're going to start ramping up our aid, that means somebody else is going to have to get less aid unless they're willing to put more money into the system. And I think right now they don't have the appetite for that. It's been an interesting discussion as we've talked with our legislative lobbyist. That shocking that this budget got done as quick as it did, because even when the one party had all three, both Senate, the House, and the governor's office, they didn't sign a budget last time until, I think, what was it, September 1st?
It was
I mean, we
just
were
as
kind of-
late as it usually is.
Yeah, I mean, we were contemplating, or we were kind of thinking that we would be operating a couple months into this year at least without totally knowing what the budget would be. So we're in a better spot than we thought we would be.
All right, any other questions about that? Moving on from legislative budget, then you have a report from
Yeah.
your district.
Yeah, so I was out in Washington D.C. last week as part of the, I'm on the AASA, that's the American Association of School Administrators, their governing board, and so they send us out there to Washington to lobby at a federal level. And this is a new experience for me on multiple levels. One, I'd never been to Washington D.C., and two, is as big of a machine as I thought the state government was trying to get anything done. I mean, it pales in comparison. We did have the opportunity to talk to representatives from all 10 of our offices in Wisconsin. The big thing is, you think about the federal government doesn't play a huge role in public schools, but even for us, it plays an even less role, because most of the federal government's programs are based on free or reduced lunch percentages, and since our free or reduced lunch percentage is so low, we don't have huge impact. But one area where it does have a substantial impact to us is the IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disability Education Act, and that's has to do with special ed funding. And so that's where I spent my time talking about that. And also E-rate. We get quite a bit of money from E-rate, and what that does is that helps subsidize our internet. It also, I think, back we used it to help run fiber, didn't we, Dave, to all of our buildings? Yep, and now E-rate 2.0 allows a lot of the wireless reimbursements and things like that. And so it's just a totally different animal with these folks. And what I did is I put in here the kind of the lobbying sheets that we used in our talking points as we met with different members of the congressional staff and the senatorial staff. It is interesting because the majority of the meetings are with their staff. And, as we talk to the lobbyists that actually are out there all the time, they said, you're better off meeting with their staff than you are meeting with them, because it's their staff that actually have, as big as the state government is and the small of a piece that we are when it comes to that, when you look at it at a federal level and the range of issues, education becomes even a much more specialized topic. And so we met with the folks that especially kind of run their education, I don't know, platform, I don't know if that'd be the right way to describe it, to talk through some of these different components. I will say that right now, one of the other components I wanted to hit on is there's been talk about a reinvesting in school infrastructure at the federal level, and primarily they're looking at, as it relates to QSABs, and those are qualified, qualified zone academy bonds, and what it is that they're very low interest bonds. And in some cases, I know in the district where I was a high school principal, when we used the QSAB bonds, it actually, the discount on the bonds ended up digging into the principal. So we are actually paying back less than we borrowed. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And that was back in '08, back when they were trying to spark some, development. But now they want to look at this as kind of a way to also reinvest in infrastructure. And so one of the things that we've been pushing, hey, maybe you look at some of those type of bond structures and things along those lines. What it does, it allows investors to get take it as a tax write-off, essentially, the difference on what they would normally get and what they're actually charging for interest type of thing, and it gives them a little bit different look. But there's some different things with that. The FY20 appropriations, the biggest concern that we have is, and it ties back to IDEA funding, is if you remember a long time ago, they had this deal where the sequestration happens. If they don't come to certain agreements, then there's certain things that are automatically sequestered. That hasn't gone away. That's kind of a permanent thing. So they have to always come back and start over and actually override that sequestration, and the Department of Ed is one of them. One of the things that's interesting is, there's been a lot of talk one way or the other. I think the big piece is we're trying to kind of push back on the vouchers and the charter schools from a federal level. That's been kind of a big push from the federal Department of Ed. And again, it goes back to the same conversation that we have at the state level, which is when you try to fund multiple systems with the same funding source, eventually somebody loses out on that. And because there's usually not additional money being thrown into those things. Usually it's supplanting, and taking money from what's already there. So great opportunity, very eye-opening. First time, like I said, in the National Mall. One of the highlights of the trip was I had scheduled a visit through Congressman Duffy's office, a tour of the Capitol, and I was able to get a tour from a Hudson graduate, Jake Somerville, and it was great. We walked through the Capitol. He showed me different parts of the building, and then he said I called my parents and said I was giving the superintendent a tour of the Capitol today, and I go, oh, okay, and he was kind of excited, and he goes, do you mind if we take a picture real quick? And I'm like, I'm the littlest deal in this whole town, but yes, you bet, I will take a picture with you at the Capitol. And so it was a lot of fun to talk with him, and he's also attending Iowa State. So we know he's obviously.
So he has some comments.
We know that he's obviously a solid individual. But what a small world. Here I am out in Washington D.C. getting a quick tour of the Capitol from a Hudson graduate that's also going to Iowa State. So that's kind of the gist of where we're at on the federal level.
Do we get to see the picture?
Yeah, I do have a picture. I'll send it to Tim.
All right.
So go ahead.
Any questions, though, on that? I am curious, because in reading the report that you forwarded, I saw for instance, that idea, full funding. I mean, the special ed, is a both federal and state requirement, and something that we definitely want to do, but it's got associated with a lot of cost, and we haven't had either the state or the federal government stepping up to fund that. And so,
and really what happens with that, you can see that the closest they've gotten is 18% in 2005, and what happens then when the state and the federal government don't meet their obligation, then essentially what happens is the local level is expected to cover the costs, and so we have like a fund transfer from our general fund to the special ed fund of like
About $8 million.
$7.8 million.
About
somewhere
$8, yeah.
around there.
Yep.
And so if they fully funded the way they should, and if the state fully funded the way they should, what it really is it would allow us to pull money back out that can then be spent on everybody as well. It doesn't mean that special ed would get less services. It would just mean that, we'd have, money that could be freed up to do other things.
still
So
spend the same amount, if not more. and
we'd
then
spend the
still
same
have
amount.
plenty.
Yep.
Yeah.
And one of the other challenges, and you read in here, has to do with the maintenance of effort stuff, and that's where the state gets a little bit weary about increasing any type of real increase for funding for special ed, because they're worried that if all of a sudden they have a downturn in the economy, like we did in '08, are they going to get dinged on a maintenance of effort from the federal government as far as the amount of money the state's putting in? And so that's why they've been somewhat cautious in increasing their funding. So right now with the state, they were at 26.4%. It's going up to 28%, or maybe it was at 27.4%, going up 28% for this coming year, and then it's jumping up to 30%. And that's the reimbursement rate for additional cost. And
But even if we combine state and federal, we're still talking less than 50% of what the actual increased cost is.
and that's increased costs above and beyond. So
Right.
those are reimbursed costs, yeah.
Yeah.
So trying to explain to them that, because at some point, some of the state legislators were trying to say that, oh, this is something the districts are doing to, make a side around to make more money. Well, even at 60%, which is what Governor Evers was saying, that's basically only getting reimbursed for 60 cents on the dollar for every dollar spent. I mean, so it's, I'm not a math major, but most people would tell you it's not a good investment. It's not, you're not making money on an investment where you're paying $1 and getting 60 cents back. And so we do it because it's the right thing to do to educate all kids, but it's not to make money or anything along those lines. So.
All right, any other questions? All right, hearing none, I guess this means we are now ready for reports. And I know this is the second year that we've kind of split them into two groups. Last month, we had about a dozen reports, and it looks like we have 9 here. Is there any that you need to change the order? Otherwise, are we just going to go in the order that they're listed?
No, actually, they wanted to put it to the end of the meeting, so they could listen to the rest of the meeting and then give their reports. It was, no? Okay. No, it's ready to go.
All right, high school then. Who's presenting for the high school?
Nikki will be presenting.
Excellent.
Well, I'm going to overview our high school SMART goal and then summarize some of our successes at the high school this year. So with our SMART goal, our overarching SMART goal is that by the end of the 21-22 school year, 75% of our 11th graders will be proficient or advanced in English language arts. That's where the ACT combines English reading and writing into one composite score. And to make this more manageable, we've broken it up into yearly goals. We fell slightly short of our yearly goal for this year, which was 53%. We had 47% of our students proficient or advanced in ELA on the ACT. When it comes to some of our annual sub-targets, historically, for maybe the past 5 or 6 years, we have focused on disciplinary literacy school-wide. This year, we transitioned to hyper-focus on English 9 and English 10 based on Aspire data and ACT data. So the results you're seeing are from 9th and 10th grade students in English. And we hit 2 of our 4 targets for that, and that was focused on how students can support a claim with evidence in their English classes. The results that we have give us a really good idea of where to focus our time and energy for next year. And then I know that we have some solid plans and steps in place to support our teachers and students in the areas of English language arts next year. And Dave, Sandy, and I are meeting tomorrow to plan out kind of our vision and steps for high school ELA. In transitioning to our overall school successes, I want to highlight a few in the areas of academics, in school safety, and then in athletics. So in academics, our school was identified as a level 1 pacesetter school for impressive student AP access and exam scores. So how many students are both taking AP courses and how they score. Only 17 schools in Wisconsin were recognized with this honor. We also had Molly Dato, one of our Phy-Ed teachers at the high school, named the Midwest Phy-Ed Teacher of the Year. And we had Luke Chafee and Katie Murphy honored as the 2018 AGS Geography Fellows. And a big pride point at the high school, a big focus of ours has been on co-teaching, and we have continued to increase the number of co-taught sections in English and math, and are offering even more sections next year than we are this year. So we keep expanding, which is good for all kids and fits into our goal of being a more inclusive K-12 school, or K-12 district. In terms of school safety, especially with our new school this year, a lot of effort was put into both training teachers and then educating students about school safety in our new building. And I'm happy to report that 100% of our staff members said they understand and feel comfortable with what to do if they are confronted with a severe safety threat. And over 90% of our student body stated the same, that they were comfortable and knew what to do in the event of a severe safety threat. And a lot of credit goes to some of the tabletop exercises with different teachers in each area of the school, because each area is so unique, and the efforts that teachers put into working with our students so they felt safe and supported with our safety plans. And in terms of athletics, I know Aaron and Steph may have hit on some of these at the previous board meeting, but this is the third year that we have received the WIAA Excellence Award for Athletic Programs. And I couldn't believe these, when I saw these numbers. It is really, I guess I didn't know these numbers were so high. So when you stop and think about, we had 11 conference tournament championship teams this year. And we had 14 state tournament appearances for the 18-19 school year. So when you add it all up, that's really impressive. I didn't think it was that high, and when I looked at that, I mean, that speaks to our coaches and our students and our school. So just some highlights to share with you.
Nikki, on that last one, the
Yeah.
14 state tournament appearances, that's 14 sports in which we made appearances.
Yeah.
That's not counting like 3 wrestlers made state.
Nope,
Counting that as
14
3.
different sports.
Okay, that's great.
Sports teams made it to our state tournaments.
Okay.
Awesome.
Any other questions for board members? All right, thank you for the report.
Thank you.
Next up, we have middle school.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me. Just a quick performance update on our SMART goal. We really are focusing on the writing and language research strand of the Wisconsin Forward exam. And really it's because of the depth of that strand. It really is about critical thinking. It is about analyzation. It's about making an argument, providing evidence, and then backing up your argument. And so our goal was to increase the proficiency levels at Hudson Middle School by 5%, and based on the preliminary results we've received back, we have met that goal. When you take a look at our targets, we didn't quite hit all of our targets throughout the year. We have our target of 100% of students will demonstrate growth or maintain proficiency on our rater literacy assessment. We were at about 85%. Our next target was 100% of students will be proficient on question 10, which is the writing portion of our rater literacy assessment, and we were at 93%. And then our last target was 100% of our students will increase the midpoint of their writ range on the informational text strand of the MAP assessment, and we were at 61.98%. So I think it was a good year, and you'll get more results from the forward and a much greater report in the future, but we also want to keep getting better. So some of our highlights. The focus at Hudson Middle School, really, we kind of a two-pronged approach: relationships and our PLC work, which encompasses our academics. And so one of our big successes this year was we transformed our advisory program. Advisory used to be 15 minutes after recess. By the time kids came in, teachers came back from lunch, it ended up being about 7 to 8 minutes of administrivia and then on to the next class. And so we moved it to the start of the day. It's a 21-minute soft landing. We've reduced our advisory ratio from 30-to-1 students to 15-to-1. And so we can create better relationships. And our one goal this year was that every single middle student, every single day would be greeted by an adult. And we were successful. So if you take a look at some of our highlights, 81% of our students this spring on a student survey, it indicated they felt connected to their advisor. And so we're going to keep growing that program, using it as a vessel for some of our social emotional work, some of our character ed work, some of our academic planning work, et cetera. So that was a strong success. Some other highlights on the PLC side. I can't tell you how incredibly proud I am of our physical education staff, who put in numerous hours over the summer, last summer, and this year. And we can look at you and say right now, we are currently at Hudson Middle School teaching by student, by standard in physical education 6 through 8. And that's a huge step. A lot of thanks goes to Learning Services, Teaching and Learning, providing, some supports for us, instructional coaches, but again, the heavy lifting was done by the staff, and so I want to make sure we point that out. In addition, at the end of the year, I don't know how many of you saw that, but we sure hope to see your faces next spring. Our physical education department had their first community outreach, and they had a color run. We had 250 students and their parents and their little brothers and sisters show up and did a 1 mile color run. It was fantastic. It was a great accomplishment, and we're just getting started there, so we're hoping to see that grow year after year after year. Some more PLC work. Our middle school technical education department, consisting of Chris DeLeon, Jody Bray, and Aaron Harker, were named the middle level technical education program for the state of Wisconsin. A huge honor. It was wonderful to go down there and see them receive their awards in the Dells. Working on some concerns I know the board has even talked about. We partnered with Cindy Mitchell, our AODA coordinator, and all of our students in grades 6 through 8 through their health classes participated in the electronic nicotine delivery system vape prevention education. And so we'll continue to focus on that. We know it's an issue. We know it's not going to be solved by 1 year of talking to them. We know we have to continue to come back at it, continue to have those conversations. But, again, just another highlight of something that one of our staff members brought our way with Cindy. And then finally, at the either state or national level, we had students recognized in Math Counts, Future Problem Solvers, National History Day, Science Olympiad, Destination Imagination, the National Council of Teachers of English, and the Spelling Bee. So it was a darn good year. Thank you. Any questions?
Any questions for our middle school report? Otherwise, thank you for the report. Great job, and thank you.
Thank you much.
Good job. Nice job, Jim.
Okay, next up, we have teaching and learning, and that's Dave and Sandy.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, Sandy and I will split this one, and I'll start off. A lot of what I will be talking about tonight was either mentioned previously with the other reports or tonight already with Nikki and Jim. So I'm going to start out with the NWEA Measure of Academic Progress. We often call this the MAP test. It was a fantastic year at the elementary level with the MAP test. So in all 6 major measures at the elementary level using the MAP assessment, we saw significant gains. So when I say all 6 components, so reading and math, both in the percentage of students that met their MAP growth target, and the total growth that was achieved, and also the projected proficiency in reading and math. So in all 6 areas, so fantastic work there.
That was at the elementary level?
At the elementary level, yep. Hudson Middle School level was a little more flat. We'll continue to work on that. As Jim said, always looking for ways to grow. And it doesn't take place at the high school. That's not an assessment we use at the high school. And the reason we included this one, a lot of the other results right now are preliminary and are embargoed. We'll be able to give you more detailed reports on some of the other assessments when they are released to the public. The next section, Rigor, Teamwork, Inclusion Initiative, and Aaron will touch on this a little bit too. This is a shared initiative between Student Services and Teaching and Learning. So when we say all students means all students, this is sort of where the rubber hits the road with this Rigor, Teamwork, Inclusion team. This was a team of district leaders, over 60 teachers, specialists, and administrators on this team. We met after school 3 times this year, provided dinner and childcare and fantastic, really invigorating conversations about how we can make a more inclusive environment for all of our students. We had 4 pillars that we broke down and studied and are creating implementation plans for those. That's very dramatic for this, I like that. We've got universal design for learning, co-teaching, student support teams, and our multi-leveled systems of support. And with the 3 minutes that we have, I can't explain all that, but we'll be glad to talk more about that at a later point. And then educator effectiveness, some changes with educator effectiveness. There were some changes in the system and the structure of educator effectiveness, but also changes in the way we aligned educator effectiveness to our TSS structure, and that necessitated some continual professional development. The biggest thing is we deprioritize the standards. We used to have priority standards, and although those priority standards are still very important, we have to focus on all of the standards. So we changed the way we provided the professional learning and increased that at all levels. And then the last one I will touch on is the Hudson Virtual School planning and implementation. We're feeling really good about what we've accomplished so far. We're ready to roll next year with our Hudson Virtual School. Sarah Engstrom-White has done an amazing job. She was emailing stuff to us today. She's a workhorse and has been doing a fantastic job. So first we formed the committee with a bunch of different stakeholders, established some plans, established our protocols and procedures, and then launched, and we have over 60 students that in some way have signed up for some level of blended virtual education. And with that, I'll pass it over to Sandy.
As far as curriculum and instruction, and implementation of some new resources, a new series, college preparatory math, was implemented at the middle school, as well as updated editions of the McGraw-Hill and Pearson products for algebra, geometry, algebra 2, and math courses above that as well. The elementary transitioned to a standards-based report card and an accompanying document to assist parents and guardians titled Understanding Your Child's Report Card was created. The focus at the elementary level continued on literacy with intense professional learning on guided reading or small group instruction. The fidelity of implementation was strongly supported by our principals and the teaching and learning coaches. In the area of assessment, the teaching and learning team worked to increase the use of interim assessments at all levels. Interim assessments are designed to benchmark and monitor progress and inform decisions regarding pacing, grouping, extensions, and remediation. Illuminate Education was the tool used to access pre-built reports and in many cases to build the assessments. The data was then analyzed by teams during their PLC time. And then another new piece that we added this year, the Teaching and Learning Advisory Council. This year, the council was established. Representation includes parents from all levels as well as our teaching and learning team. The goal is to explore a variety of curriculum instruction and assessment topics and for members to gain a deeper understanding of our programs. So are you catching up? Sue's going to be talking about 4K later on. Any questions for teaching and learning?
Well, just with that Teaching and Learning Advisory Council, I mean, because that's a great way of getting public engagement. We've got, like you said, 18, it's a committee of 18. Is that something we might be able to get a report on, like later in the year, once it's been implemented a while? And
It's been implemented for almost a full year now. I mean,
All right. But I just would, and maybe perhaps like bringing in, if you've got like a leader of that, and having them talk about maybe how the public is involved and engaged in that, because we really do appreciate those people that step up and willing to volunteer in that capacity, so.
That would be great. Maybe what we could do is bring that back in the fall after our first meeting next year, and that'd be a good opportunity to sort of recap the learning that we engaged in the previous year.
All right, excellent. Thank you, thank you.
Mr. President, I
Yes.
just wanted to ask Dave, so for the virtual school planning, like how many community stakeholders, I suppose it's faculty as well, but how many from the community are involved in that?
We actually didn't have any direct involvement from community members, but when we look at going to a virtual charter school, we definitely will. In fact, that will be a necessity in that there will be an actual board that'll be an appointed board from this board that will help in the direction for the virtual charter school.
All right, anything else then from teaching and learning? Otherwise, move on to student services. That's Erin.
So this year we continued our work in meeting the needs of all students. This year we were fortunate to have been selected as the recipient of the school-based mental health grant. This allowed us to increase student access to mental health services by providing co-facilitated groups in all district buildings. So when we compare student access to some sort of mental health service, we increased from approximately 80 students in the previous year to 173 this year, which was really exciting. We were also able to provide professional development to all staff, beyond our certified teachers, which is pretty great, on anxiety, depression, self-regulation, as well as activities to start to address staff self-care and that compassion resilience piece for our staff. Along with our mental health grant work, we also began planning for the implementation of trauma-sensitive schools within our elementary schools. The middle school is well on its way on this journey. I think they just completed their 4th year. So they've been a big support in helping our elementary team plan. Also implemented teacher-child interaction training, which is an evidence-based strategy designed to improve the social, emotional, and behavioral competence for young children. The research about TSET also shows that it improves teacher efficacy as well, which is important and kind of tied to that self-care piece. We trained 6 internal coaches and 18 staff members throughout this year. It's a pretty intensive training where the coaches spend time in classrooms kind of coaching teachers through the strategies. The staff who were trained saw an 80% increase in their students' ability to utilize pro-social behavior and decrease their risk for exhibiting and developing social emotional problems. Like Dave talked about, we continued our collaboration with learning services to increase inclusive practices, ownership, and growth for all of our students through the Rigor Teamwork and Inclusion Group. Like he said, it's a group of about 60 people, and really talking about inclusion beyond just a place and really providing a purpose for each one of our students in their learning, which is really exciting. And then we also collaborated on the virtual school planning, which will allow us to better meet the needs of all of our students through flexible schedules and continue to support them through that as well. Lastly, we increased family and community engagement by reestablishing our special education parent advisory group. We had about 20 to 30 parents a few times this year meet. The goal of that group is really to increase engagement and support for families who have students with disabilities. What can we do as that collective group to reach out and further support? Also established the Hudson Area Mental Health Council, which includes students, staff, parents, community members, and mental health providers, and really just talking about what we're seeing as the needs of our students, what the community is seeing, and what students are seeing as well. So I'm excited to keep that group going next year as well. Any questions?
Board members?
I know you give us, at some point in the year, you give us statistics and so on. Does suicide, is that a topic that's part of?
Yep, that'll be part of an upcoming presentation when we talk about our YRBS data. I'll put that together with all of our mental health data from the year too.
Thank you.
Yep.
Well, coming off of our school board statewide training that was over in Appleton on Friday and Saturday, both days really was overlapping discussion about social emotional learning, and a lot happening in the mental health area, and a lot of excitement in that area. So I like to see that we're trying to be cutting edge in that regard.
One of the most exciting things this year was the professional development that we had offered for staff and surveyed them afterwards. And when we surveyed them a year ago, they were really looking for just more awareness about different mental health topics. And now that they have this awareness, they're feeling kind of this urgency of, okay, now what are the strategies? Like, I get it now, but what are we going to do? And so it's an uncomfortable place for them to be, but I think it's an exciting step, if that makes sense.
Okay. Any further questions for student services? All right. Thank you for that concise report, and look forward to your other reports. I know one highlight that wasn't on here, but and if I missed it, apologize, but I didn't see an expulsion hearing this last year, so I thought that should be in there as a positive highlight. Yeah. All right. Moving on then to instructional technology services.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to talk about 3 key areas today of things that we've accomplished this year. We've done a lot, including completing a construction project, which we'll end with. But we're going to start really at that classroom level around instructional technology. So one thing that we really took on this year and really started
I guess in the late fall, early winter, and then all the way through spring, was around data privacy. So what we did as a group is, with our instructional side of things and the informational side of things, we provided professional learning for staff around data privacy and data security and what that really means. We've talked about FERPA for a really long time, but data wasn't available before like it is now, and so now that it's really accessible, we need to plan around that and problem solve. So we provided training for staff, as well as changed our process around how staff members can select educational resources that might share or use student data. So through that professional learning, we collected up all of the, we call them web resources. Most people call them apps, but they're websites and whatever, that collect student data. And then there's an extreme vetting process that we do. So teaching and learning, it's extreme. Yep, super extreme. It takes a really long time. So teaching and learning, along with myself and IT, we review all of the applications that teachers want to use with students, and then teaching and learning ultimately decides, does this align with with the classroom priorities and instructional priorities? If it does, then I'll go through and review it for data privacy and data security practices. So through that process, there were well over 350 applications that came in from teachers, which is really exciting, but also a lot of applications to go through. And as a part of that process, we will now have a public-facing portal for parents, which really looks, if you haven't seen ClassLink before, you'll be able to see it on the website. It shows all of the resources that are approved, what grade levels they're used at, and what devices they're accessible on. So then you as a parent can see, oh, okay, I know that BrainPop is used K-8, and it's accessible on an iPad, cell phone, Chromebook, whatever it may be. On the flip side of that, we're also working to train our vendors and transition them to more increased data privacy practices and data security by doing a vendor pre-screen where they have to basically share with us all the things that they do, what they collect, how their software or product works, as well as then we have them sign a data sharing agreement, which is part of our Wisconsin state work. So that's really around data privacy. As we think a little bit bigger around classroom design, we are continuing our process of installing new classroom projection systems, the Epson BrightLink systems. If you've been at the high school, you'll see a lot of those. Throughout the district, we have an additional 75 that either are already installed or will be through this summer. So we're really excited about that, and we're kind of shifting how classroom technology works for the teacher. Additionally, we purchased some more student Chromebooks at the elementary level to continue that increased access. So we're pretty excited about that. Those will all go into the elementary classrooms next week. And then if we think about it on the large scale, our year actually ended with the closure of the high school construction project. And through that high school construction project, we were actually able to do a rather large infrastructure upgrade, thanks in much part to E-rate funds, as Nick had mentioned before. So this infrastructure update supported not only the high school, but also all of the buildings, because all of our network connections do come in at the high school and kind of star out to the rest of the buildings. Yeah, other than that, we talked at a previous board meeting about how we are doing some simulated phishing attacks for our staff. As I mentioned before, in our baseline data showed that 30% of staff clicked on the malicious links when we first did our test about a year ago. And when our most recent test, when we ended the year, we had about 12.2% of our staff click on those links. So the simulated attacks, as well as the training that staff get when they click on something, is definitely working for staff. We're getting an increased awareness from staff. That's pretty much it.
And how many school board members replied to those malicious emails that were being supposedly sent by me?
That data is strictly confidential. We are not here to embarrass or shame. So it's maybe not just Jamie. No, I'm just kidding.
Not just Jamie.
But I think it's definitely what's great about this process is that we're seeing that increased awareness. We're getting a lot more phone calls, a lot more emails. We got one just last week saying, "Who is this Joe Barbie? Why did he email me?" Well, he's one of us, so let's say if we're okay. But people are really starting to be more aware of their surroundings and what people want from them. So.
Wow. And I appreciate on the data privacy. I know that you had to institute, additional layers, and for people who might not be the most technologically literate, it can be very frustrating from personal experience. But I also know that it's all for the best for students. We're trying to protect student privacy, so.
Well, thank you so much.
Appreciate your work in that regard.
Okay.
Quick question.
Yeah, question.
Can you say just a little bit about work the district continues to do to help parents? I know that's something that personally I struggled with, and I hear from other parents, kind of the continued learning that we have to do to adapt to this new online world where everything's there instead of spread out on the kitchen table. So
Yeah.
can you speak just a little bit to that?
So Google Classroom has been really helpful, I think, with that process. We heard what families were saying about, there's so many different places that we're getting communication. We have Blackboard, we have Classroom, we have teacher emails, we have Peak of the Week, we have so many things. And so what we tried to do is really streamline that, especially at the secondary level where there are 6, 8, 10 potentially teachers that a student may have, by turning on those guardian summaries. And this year was the first year that we streamlined that process. Prior to this past school year, teachers had to manually input all of that data for parent contact information, and they had to manually say, Heather, you get a new email address. A teacher had to manually change that. So one of the changes that we wanted to make was to streamline that process. So we, at the district level, build all those Google Classrooms for teachers. We populate all of the parent information, and then we populate all of the students as well. So we're hopeful that that's hopefully going to shift how things work. In 612, it is a requirement for teachers to turn on those guardian summaries. So you kind of get that one-stop shop. The nice thing about that is that parents can opt in. They can choose, I would love this communication, I want it every single day, I want it weekly, or please don't send me any more emails. They can ultimately choose their own destiny as far as how much communication. So that's really a step one for us. We're working on our reader portal to try to make that really more, we know that our website's really built for our community, whereas the reader portal really focuses on some of those school-based things that are going on or classroom-based things. So, thank you.
Thank you for your report.
Thank you.
Next up is going to be Holton, and I think you have 2 reports probably, right? So we got Holton and 4K.
Double the information tonight.
Welcome, Sue.
Thanks. I'll start by sharing my pride in the highlights from Holton Elementary. We worked pretty diligently and intentionally with the NWA MAP information this year, looking at kind of digging in, comparing to our priority standards and digging into the MAP continuum, and we're pleased with our results. Where 72% of our 1st through 5th graders met their growth targets in ELA, which was a slight increase from last year, and 71% of our K-5 students were at or above the 61st percentile, being on their way to being college and career ready, which was also an increase from last year. We targeted the area of vocabulary, feeling like that was one of those pillars that is very important for reading instruction, and found that 69% of our K-5 students reached the 61st percentile in that area as well. And so all of these things are things that we will continue to work on. We felt like our work this year showed strong results, and my SMART team felt very strongly about continuing our work and our focus in these areas. Some of the strategies that we used were the Jan Richardson training that was provided for all of our K-5 teachers, which was a guided reading format. Teachers are getting some additional materials this year or this coming fall that will help supplement and support this format. Our teachers worked very closely with our instructional coaches, and the coaches came in and modeled and gave feedback and helped plan. And in my building, I felt like the instructional coach was very instrumental in the implementation and the success of our guided reading. The guided reading was focused on individual student growth, which we could see in the growth, but it also got all kids reaching an achievement of 61st percentile. So I felt like it kind of it did both things. It was able to achieve our achievement and our growth targets. We also focused on our school culture and climate within our school, within our staff, within our families, and within our community outside of the school building. I always, because of our location, I try really hard to connect with the high school and provide lots of opportunities for high school students to come in so that the Holton students see that they are part of this bigger district and that they too will be Hudson Raiders down the road. So we invited them in for a lot of things. One of the favorite was when the students, the seniors came wearing their caps and gowns. That was a real hit and a real cool thing, I thought, for the students, the elementary kids, to see. Some of them had siblings that were seniors and neighbors and so on, so they knew some of the kids, but my students made signs and crepe paper and all sorts of things, so it was a really fun celebration, and I think the high school seniors spent probably another 30 minutes taking pictures outside in front of the sign, and so I think it was a really cool thing for them as well. We have spent a great deal of the last 3 years working on the Holton Art Bench, and it is in conjunction with the St. Croix Valley Art Bench Trail, which is a partnership with the FIPS, and we are the 10th bench on that trail, and the bench is located in the Loop Trail, which is directly across the street from Holton. This has been really a celebration of learning and a celebration of community. We started with our 3rd and 4th graders and tied our learning to their standards in social studies. 3rd grade does community, 4th grade does Wisconsin history. Then this past year we tied in 5th grade and their standards in biomes and some natural surroundings. And so the students really learned about the history, the natural resources, the culture, what has happened in that space over the course of years, and took that learning and really created a space that represented this historical evolution of things that have occurred there over time, and created a gathering space. And I included a picture at the end because when I speak of this art bench, people have a very different picture in their mind than what it actually turned out to be. So we started working with John Coleman, who is an architect in Hudson, and he helped the kids go through the design process that he uses as an architect. And so the kids spent 3 two-hour workshops. We had 62 kids in 5 different groups working, and the level of engagement and excitement was amazing. And we had people from the Bike Coalition, people from St. Joe Township, Wisconsin Department of Transportation. We had a ton of different people coming in and out of these meetings, and everyone was so impressed with the kids and their excitement about designing. So they came up with something that would draw people to sort of a focal point in Holton. With all of the construction and all of the changes with the roads and such, it has changed Holton, and so they wanted to develop something that would bring people together, to bring our community together. And so they created a gathering space that, Tim, I don't know if you can go down to the picture. It's easier if people have a visual. So we worked very closely with Rivard Stone, who's a parent at Holton. We worked, after the architect kind of got the design set, he actually ended up moving, and so we then moved to hiring a landscape designer, and worked with Dan Shimon with Willow River Tree, and they came and did the actual implementation or the building of the space. And so we have, I think it's 32 boulders that are set for seating for 25 to 30 people. There's going to be, it doesn't look super raised, but there's a 6-inch raised stage area where people could stand and talk. We are anticipating this would be a space obviously used by our Holton students, but it could be a bike group, it could be a book club, it could be a Girl Scout troop, a church that would come and use this space. What's really cool, and this was an idea that Dan Shimon brought, was we asked each of the 15 groups to come up with an image that represented their thinking. And so they ranged from a picture of the state to canoe paddles crossed, and so they did pencil drawings of these images and then gave them to our high school tech ed department, who made them into metal steel images that then were placed into pavers, which aren't in yet, but they're going to be in between. I don't have a picture of that. I should have, but but keep scrolling. No, I'm just kidding. Between that half circle stage and the rocks, there's going to be 15 of these 2x2 pavers that have these kids' images. So then Rivard took the idea and said, well, we're going to etch those images into the stones. And so 15 images are etched. Some are black outlined, some are not. And so the kids all have an image somewhere etched into the stone, so that it tells a story a little bit about their learning. And so on the last day, June 1st is when we built this, and then on the last day of school, we brought over groups, grade levels, and they had a scavenger hunt where they had to find all of the different images that were etched in. And so it's been a really cool process, a really cool program, and it has exceeded, I think, all of our expectations about bringing so many different people together. My health assistant ran into Mike Hartman at the gym, and he said, well, I'll donate money. And so it's just been kind of this word of mouth, and we've had a lot of Holton parents and Holton community members, master gardeners, and all sorts of people that have stepped up and really contributed. So that is my one highlight this year, because it has really taken a lot of our time and energy, but in a really, really great way. I know Sue said she went out to see it. So
I drove by, but the lighting wasn't very good, so I'm going to come back another day, maybe early in the morning, and get some good contrast. But
yeah,
this will become part of numerous benches that can be destinations for you to
Yep.
visit, and if superintendent cares about this, I could send you the FIPS link that has the map and little miniature pictures of
That'd be great.
Yeah.
all the other ones.
And
Just
most
curious.
of them are benches, and ours is a gathering space, which fell under their description of what this project could look like. And so I've worked very closely with, I don't know if any of you know Anastasia through the FIPS has been amazing. And I told her, so I'm kind of sad this is done because we've worked and we've spent so much time together, but it's been a great project.
Well,
Jean?
thank you for that detail on the project, because it's always good to see examples of collaborative learning and
Yeah.
collaborative doing. I was just curious, if the public wanted to see it, should they park at the school and walk over?
No.
Or should they park at,
There
park
are
at the
signs
park
that
and
say no.
ride? Yeah.
You can park, so actually, we just met last Wednesday to kind of go over final things, and as we were meeting, they removed the signs. That the park has been closed. They are not quite finished, and so they removed the do not enter signs, and so now there are bikes and pedestrians going through, and so the loop trail, the circle isn't complete, but that part of the trail, and now the tunnel is open, so you can go through, you can park. There's like 16 parking spots at the end of School Circle, right by Holton, and then there's also a big park and ride across the road by where the roundabouts are. There's a big park area
Thank you.
there.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, no, come and see it. It is actually, and the kids were extremely proud of their work. So I will also now move into 4K. I was sitting there thinking, what is this, like year 3, year 4? No, this is year 2. It feels like year 10. No, I'm kidding. We have completed our second year of 4K, and I, at the end of last year and at the end of this year, did a survey, and I had significantly less people last year. I had over 50% of the families responded and only 20% this year, but still I had 93% of the families were satisfied or extremely or satisfied with their child's experience, which is down 1 percentage point from last year, and 93% were satisfied with their experience as a parent, which is up a little bit from last year. But our area of focus this year was communication. That came in at 73% of people that were satisfied or extremely last year, and we put some things into place where which resulted in 85% being happy with the communication they received. The challenge with this is that I have 13 places, and so I had 2 school sites and 11 partner sites, and so trying to manage and sort of make sure everybody's communicating has been challenging. But my secretary, 4K secretary, has really found some ways where she's sharing information with sites, and they're then kind of copying and pasting and sending it out. But she's also started a district email, which goes out every Friday to families, and that we've gotten a lot of great feedback from the Skyward email thing where they get the information straight, and so then we're not dependent on the sites sending it out. We had 314 students last year, this past year, which was up 8 from the year before our first year. And I just talked to Jen today, and she has approximately 323 signed up. However, there's only 260 in Skyward, and I said, is that panic? And she said, nope, that's where we were last year. It just means that they haven't completed the Skyward registration, but we have 323 kids placed. So up a little bit from last year, so growing, not in huge percentages, but still growing each year. Different this coming year is that our 2 school sites will both be at Willow River Elementary, which will be really nice for them to be able to kind of plan together and be more collaborative with each other. So looking forward to that. Those 2 will be co-taught, so we'll have a blend of regular ed and special ed students, which has been extremely successful for everybody for the last year or 2 years that we have done that. We continued with our 87.5 community outreach hours, which is a component of the 4K program that we really like. We have to do these community things, but it's really fun. The parents love coming and meeting the other kids that are in their kids' classrooms and the teachers and that sort of thing. So that will continue as well. We spent about a week this summer coming up with essential standards or priority standards for 4K and narrowed. WEMOS has, I don't know, Aaron, hundreds of standards, and we narrowed it down to 22 essential standards with about 50 I can statements, which kind of then further detail out the essential. We have a group meeting at the end of July that's going to come up with the assessments, and that's going to really drive and focus what we do with our program. And I'm very excited because I think it's going to streamline and help provide focus to our teachers and our overall staff. So it felt like it was a great year, and looking forward to another great year next year. Questions about either Holton or 4K?
Carrie, you have a question?
Well, can I ask you a question about Holton?
Yes.
With the graduating seniors coming back, did you notice were a lot of teachers of those graduates, of your current staff?
Yes, were they there? Or do I still
Yes.
have? Yes, absolutely. And they, some of them were in tears and had made signs and things for the kids. It was really, I knew it was going to be cool, and it was, of course, touched my heart because my daughter was one of them, but it was fun watching the rest of the staff because they were very touched by the kids. And the part that shocked me was how long the seniors stayed. And they rang the bell and sang the school song, and it was really cool. I know this is the first time we've done it, and all my staff and actually all the seniors I've talked to are hoping that that's something that we continue to do as a district. It was neat.
Great. Any other questions about either Holton or the 4K? It's just an observation that I'd like to see that number on the open enrollment for the 4K. That was one of our hopes in launching that program.
Yeah, I didn't share that, but we did move. We moved the number.
Our system, yes.
Yeah, we increased. We almost doubled, and I think Tim, we just added another one today. So we were at 27. I think we're at 28 now. So.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of those kids, our capture rate on that's not overly high, because a lot of them happen to be going to St. Pat's or Trinity.
Or they do it for the convenience of the childcare, but then they want them in their neighborhood schools for kindergarten up. But we, I think, kept 7 or 8 open enrolled back into the district then for kindergarten this fall.
But like you said, we're only finishing 2 years of actually implementing this, so we still got lots of years ahead, and it'll be fun to see those. Interesting anyway to see the stats long term and the impact on our.
And again, this year, kindergarten teachers' feedback was that kids felt like the kids were coming into kindergarten orientation more engaged, more ready to be present and learning, and so feeling the positive effects of the program.
Excellent.
All
right.
Thanks.
Anything else? Thank you for that report.
Nice job, Sue.
Hudson Prairie. And we have Principal Joe Benke coming to the microphone. So.
Yep. Evening, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to come and present tonight. So when you're summarizing a year, it's hard to get everything into 3 minutes. And so I just took a snapshot of a few of our goals based off of our SMART goal. So I want to share that first. So our SMART goal is, it's a 3-year running goal right now. This was the first year out of the 3. And so in 2021, we'd like 70% of our elementary students to score proficient or advanced as judged by the Forward exam. That's our state assessment. And so those numbers are in, but they're preliminary right now and they're embargoed, so we can't share those yet. But our growth goal and our achievement goal that I'd like to share are good predictors for that Forward, and I'll get into that in just a little bit here as well. So our growth goal was 65% of our 1st through 5th graders will meet their individual growth targets, and we had 65% of our 1st through 5th graders actually meet that spring to spring goal. So that's last year's spring goal to this year's spring. So we're very excited about that. We'll shoot for about that 68% next year, that mark, and then hopefully get to that 70 in that area as well the following year. And then a highlight with that one is our kindergartners do not take that test in the fall. We do not test our kindergartners in the fall. And in the winter was their first time taking it, and that's kind of a big deal to have kindergartners sit down and take a computerized test. You can imagine what that might look like with 20 kindergartners. And so in the winter, we tested them for the first time, and then in the spring again, and so 73% of our kindergartners met their winter to spring goal, and so we thought that was pretty impressive as well. Moving on to achievement, so this is our really good predictor for the Forward exam, and so we look at that 61st percentile in the MAPS as that college and career ready mark, and our goal is to have 65% of our K2 students at that level, and we had 61% of our K2 students at that level predicting where that is at. If you look at 3-5, I didn't have that up on the screen here, but we had 68% of our 3-5 students at that 61st percentile, and so that hopefully will predict very well into the Forward as it has in years past. I'd like to highlight on one big action step. As you can see, there's a ton of action steps that go into this SMART goal. But the one that I would really like to highlight is our Jan Richardson training that we did this year. We had an instructor, Carolyn Gwynn, come in a couple times this year. to train our teachers really in that guided reading and get our whole staff kind of on board and what that looks like, kind of recalibrate, reset all of us. And then big kudos goes to our instructional coach, Chloe Bryan. I like to mention her. She followed up those sessions by then touching base with our teachers, getting in the classroom and really making sure those practices were being implemented, and we believe that's a big piece of why our scores are where they're at. And we're going to continue with that this following year, and we're excited to be even adding to our guided reading libraries the component of our reading resource that we're going to be implementing as well. So we're excited to see where that kind of leads us as an action step. And then moving on to some of the building highlights. We're one of the 2 buildings in the district that got to house the 4K program that Sue's been talking about over the last 2 years. We're going to be losing that program this year. That's all going to be based down at Willow. So North Hudson and Prairie's 4Ks are going to be housed now at Willow. That'll be exciting to have them in one location, I think, especially a central spot. But it's going to be sad seeing the 4-year-olds leave the building. That was a highlight of everybody, is to get to interact with those 4-year-olds. They bring a different dynamic to the building. So we enjoyed it for the 2 years while we had it, but we're sad to see them go too. Another building highlight is we really focused on kind of the wellness and fitness piece, and so we had a roller skating night, with a family roller skating night, a family bowling night. We have a couple run clubs during the year that culminate in our spring fun run on Mother's Day weekend. And then we incorporate all school move-its. We've even went to promoting wellness and health through alternatives to birthday snacks even. And so we still allow sugary snacks if kids want to bring them, but we have a lot of alternatives that kids can choose from too, to kind of go away from that. Now that was a big change right away for families, but we're seeing at least 75%, I don't have that stat on here, but of our families have kind of went away from that and are going to other things like bring a stuffed animal, they bring a pencil in or an eraser or things like that, compared to that sugary snack, and it goes to a lot of the dietary needs that our students have these days. So that's just one other highlight there. One other thing I would like to highlight is our partnership with the Hudson Kiwanis Club. We have a program we call Hudson Heroes, and what that is 4th or 5th graders who come up with something that can better our school, our community, or our surrounding area. And the Kiwanis Club provides the volunteers, and it's student-driven, student-led. And then we culminate the year by having a big presentation of their projects. They get to talk about them. Their parents get to come in. It's fun to watch those community volunteers get to interact with those families. And we have a big pizza party to kind of culminate that at the end of the year. And then lastly, we're well into our summer preparation for this upcoming year. We know we're moving with the boundary rezoning a little bit to include over 15 new certified and support staff that are coming into the building this year. And so you can imagine what that looks like in our hallways right now as our custodial staff are helping get ready for that. And then welcoming in over 150 new students this fall. And so our enrollment as of today was around that 498 mark at our building. And so we're excited for that. We know that that's going to provide a new baseline for us in some of our annual goals with that rise in students. But as you heard from all of our colleagues at the elementary level, we're all hovering around that same mark. And so we anticipate our scores and everything else to stay in that same realm. We're not going to be shifting that too much. We expect things to stay at a high level there. And then in concluding here, I would like to just, I know Sue's the only elementary colleague I have here tonight, but I'd just like to say thank you to my elementary principal team. It's nice to have a team to roll things off of, and I'm ending my 2nd year, moving into my 3rd year, and it's kind of a bittersweet year because we got to say goodbye to Amy Hamburg this year, Dr. Hamburg, I should say. And what's unique about that is my 1st year in the district, I student taught in 3rd grade at EP Rock, and it's fun to watch it come full circle as she retires, and we welcome Shannon in, who also worked under Amy at EP Rock. Just what a neat group of people that is to work with, and how we all support each other. So I really appreciate that, and I wanted to make sure that was said out loud. Sue, I know you're the only one who gets to hear it, but you can help relay that for me. Questions? Anybody have questions for me?
Any questions for Hudson Prairie?
All right, appreciate the time. Thank you.
There, thank you. All right, last but certainly not least, we have Human Resources.
That's right, it's my turn. I'm sure we're all just raring to hear about HR. Of course we are. Okay, so the first topic, I'm going to break it up into a couple different areas. So the first one is recruitment, recognition, and accountability. So breaking it up there, couple highlights would be that we coordinated and posted the filling of over 75 certified staff vacancies, 6 administrator vacancies, over 50 athletic vacancies, and over 100 support staff vacancies during the 18-19 school year. We also coordinated the certified staff orientation, which is scheduled to come up here August, I think, 21st, again, as well as the annual recognition banquet. And we had about 20 additional people at the recognition banquet this year as compared to the prior year. I think the word might be out about that personal day thing. So that was one of the goals, is to increase attendance there. We also had 90 student teacher placements from area universities, which continues to be a fantastic source of future hires. We've hired just this year alone multiple former student teachers as regular teachers in the district, so that's great. Then when it comes to the more business side of things, at times we had to conduct over 35 investigations in tandem with affected administrators, resulting in numerous disciplinary actions ranging from reprimands to terminations. We have multiple plans of improvement in place, such that 9 staff will not receive pay increases for 1920 due to the results. And then we also 16 other staff are no longer employed with the district as a result of these investigations. So a lot of heavy lifting when it comes to that work. Then when it comes to multi-year project progression, I kind of wanted to come up with a phrase because we have lots of multi-year projects. We have the compensation systems, we have policies, and we also have like a Skyward revamp, and then the time cards, or the timesheets that are coming out, electronic timesheets. So real quick on the compensation systems, as you guys know, we reviewed and revised the TSS system and developed a new TSS 2.0 framework that was approved by the board. We went and did, at the beginning of the school year, numerous communications and forums and different opportunities for staff to hear about that new framework, and emails and all that. We also held office hours at buildings to have them ask questions about the new system. For example, I spent the entire day at the high school and had over 20 people come in and talk to me about their specific questions regarding TSS 2.0. We also implemented the new support staff compensation system, performance-based compensation, the SSCS, during the 18-19 school year, and that included the development of new evaluation tools for all support staff, the creation of a 3-year evaluation cycle, and then procedures related to that whole process, and that went very well, as Holly Butler reported a couple months ago. And then we developed new comparable districts, as you guys know, too. So district-wide, we now have separate comp groups for each of the different employment categories, and we're continuing to analyze that data at this time. Then when it comes to policies, we have, this is the first reading tonight for the final series, the final batch of personnel policies of the 500 series. And so as we're rolling that information out to staff and to Hudson Lead, we just share that information to make sure that everybody is updated on the policies. Some of the big ones that we hit this year or deal with social media, use of technology resources, staff dress, discipline, drug testing, all of those areas. So doing that. And then another piece would be the Skyward, the data validity focus with the implementation of the new time management system. So we are, and it's so exciting because it just happened July 1st, and we're going to talk more about it next month, but we have now switched to electronic timesheets. So we have been doing paper timesheets forever. And the problem with paper timesheets is paper, right? And it requires additional processing. And so we've been working closely with financial services. Mark Cumlin and Holly Butler have done incredible heavy lifting in this regard, and having to revamp a lot of Skyward data just to make it work within the new system. And I don't want to steal their thunder because they're going to talk more about it next month. But that has gone live as of July 1st with all the it's a multi-year plan that we've put into place to get to this point. So electronic timesheets are super exciting. The last one would be the boundaries and staffing. So we certainly worked collaboratively with administrators, the boundary committee, RSP and associates with the elementary boundary resetting process. Really, it was, from my perspective, more about the board policies regarding boundary exception requests and those processes related there too. And so then I am really proud of the work we did with the building principals. It took a long time, elementary principals, it took a lot of time to get good data once the boundary changes were set. So which addresses were in which area, and then communication with families. And then we ultimately had 4-hour meeting, I think, to discuss the boundary exception request because it was our new process that we followed. And so that was really good too. I think we worked fantastic together to grant when we could the exception requests that came across. And then we did the annual staffing analysis as well, where that was a big load, or a big lift, I guess would be a better way to say it, to move all the teachers around with the new elementary boundaries. And so we moved, like Joe said, I mean, there was many teachers that moved from, for example, Rivercrest and Rock to Hudson Prairie, and we did a lot of analysis of what was best for the teams, what was the best approach for the buildings when it came to the movements. So accomplished that. And then, so looking forward to the 1920 school year, we're focusing on how to improve communication and staff engagement so that we're meeting the needs of all staff in our system, regardless of whether it's their first 90 days or their last 90 days. Really think it's an important view that we need to take going forward. So exciting opportunities lie ahead.
All right.
Mr. President, I just have one question. So the staffing engagement, the last thing you said, can you just name one initiative that you're looking at?
In terms of engagement, well, we've been looking at the data that we got from that one survey piece. But when it comes to engagement, I would say, well, one this year that we tried to listen to staff about would be about the personal day, where we had a lot of information from staff that cut off at 15 years of service for the HSD experience increase was a rub. And so we were trying to find a way to maintain that engagement, retain our staff more effectively once they get beyond that 15 years. So by doing the 20 years service additional personal day, I think we showed them that we were hearing them, and we got fantastic feedback as a result of that.
Any other questions for HR? I just, yeah, it is kind of amazing how much is done, you know, by your department, just because we have so many employees. I don't think the public realizes how much is going on, and you know, a lot of balls in the air with not just staff requests for leaves, but and then background checks, but this big thing is and again, not really well appreciated is the policy review, because it is a multi-year project, and frankly, it can be pretty boring work. But it's only boring until we actually have to enforce the policy, and then it becomes of high degree of interest. But anyway, I want to thank you for all that work, and again, comprehensive report. Any other questions? Otherwise, thank you for the report, and we'll move on to, I guess we have the seclusion and restraint annual report. I think that's Aaron.
Usually everybody leaves when I get ready to talk. So now you can see how that. Yeah. No, it's.
Yeah,
Okay.
lead now while it's not raining, maybe.
So this is the annual seclusion and restraint report. So Wisconsin Act 125 requires school districts to provide this annual report to their school board at the end of each school year, just regarding the numbers of seclusions and physical restraints. So in the report, you'll see the definition of seclusion, definition of physical restraint. It's important to know that seclusion and physical restraint are only used as a last resort, and only when a student's behavior represents a clear, present, and imminent risk of physical safety to the student or others. So students who require this level of intervention represent 0.6% of our total school population. 98% of physical restraint and seclusion happen at early childhood and elementary, which demonstrates that most students are making progress as they age in terms of self-regulation and utilizing behavior strategies. So in our data this year, we did have a slight increase from last year. It's important to note that we did reestablish a center-based program at our elementary school and transitioned some students back who were placed in alternate settings as some of our work in, creating more inclusive school district. And so many of these students require a higher level of support. And when we really dug into the data, we learned that the numbers at the beginning of the year were far higher than at the end of the school year. And so really successful strategies are being implemented for our students. When we look at the data too, we're using this in terms of planning for professional development. I talked a little bit about teacher-child interaction training. And so we'll really kind of be looking to target programs in schools that have had a slight increase, because we know that that program really works in terms of pro-social, emotional, and behavioral strategies. In each building, a crisis team of administrators, teachers, and support staff, as well as staff who work in special education programs, are trained annually in crisis prevention and intervention through in-house district trainers. The main focus of this training is how to effectively use de-escalation strategies so that we can decrease and avoid the need for physical restraint and seclusion. Obviously, the training also includes, safety in terms of secluding and restraining, but really focuses on those de-escalation strategies. So in terms of recommendations for moving forward, increased focus training in quality functional behavioral assessment, behavior intervention plans, and focusing on proactive strategies. We have some really great in-house experts who are very interested in helping to do this important work around really getting at the core of the why of a student's behavior. We'll also establish some interim measures to monitor seclusion and restraint numbers more frequently throughout the school year so that our team can help respond and navigate and facilitate conversations with teams to support that way. Continue teacher-child interaction training as an evidence-based program for constructively using language to facilitate students independently regulating behavior and strengthening teacher-student relationships. One of the things that happens anytime there's an incident where there's a physical restraint or a seclusion is the team has a debriefing meeting to kind of talk through what happened, how did it go, what could we do differently, and our team is really discussing creating kind of just a protocol for conducting those meetings and just helping to lead the conversation to get back at that functional behavior assessment and behavior plan, so that ideally we would decrease the potential of future incidents. And then, like I mentioned before, just continue to utilize and explore in-district behavioral experts, programming options for students, and continue to implement professional development in the areas of self-regulation and other evidence-based behavior strategies. Any questions about this?
Any questions for Erin? Erin, while we saw a slight uptick in the total number of incidents, the physical restraint I see is down, and I guess my question is from the board here, is there anything that you need more in resources, or are we appropriately addressing these areas at the buildings where they're occurring?
I think this ties into an increase in just what we're seeing out of young children, right? And just making sure that we're providing the supports there. And we did talk through this when we addressed staffing and ratios and things like that within special education. And really just increasing the capacity of all adults who are working with our kids. So it's a great question. I don't know that I have a straight answer for it, but it's just...
Right. What I like to hear is that as the year goes on, you're seeing a decrease in this stuff, and that maybe the programs that are being implemented are working. So that's good.
Yep. Thank you.
But every year is different, right? So,
for sure. Yep.
All right. Unless there's other questions, we'll move on then to consent agenda, and I would entertain a motion with the amount of the expenditure.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Move approval of the consent items and that the Chief Financial and Operations Officer be authorized to pay bills in the amount of $4,505,242.64.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion, a second. All in favor of approving the consent agenda items, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion is approved, and those items are approved. Move on now to superintendent contract extension. And in introducing this topic, I want to apologize again for not following through on that afternoon before the 4th of July. I wanted to get that out to board members, but we had good response, and for as far as questions, and so based on those questions, we were able to get a redlined and clean copy of the contract to all board members. I guess it was 9 hours ago, because that's what my email here says. So is there, and essentially, to sum it up, the contract is an extension of basically the same terms. One difference, we were able to determine the salary amount based on having received the data for what the impact would be from the average administrative salary. So absent that, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. President, I move that we approve the contract extension for the superintendent.
Second.
As sent out to us with the red line corrections.
Yes, the most latest.
Most
revised
latest version.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry.
Very good.
And second.
Okay, there's a motion, a second. Any further discussion or questions? All right, hearing none. All those in favor of approval say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The motion passes unopposed. Next up, academic standards identification and notification. And who do we turn this one over to next?
Sandy.
Sandy, all right, very good.
Thank you.
This is our annual report, right?
This is our annual report.
Okay.
Wisconsin Act 55, a school district must annually adopt academic standards and notify parents and guardians. This must be done at the first school board meeting of each school year, hence our reason for being here this evening with this report. Another reminder that Act 94 requires school districts to adopt standards for financial literacy. I just wanted to provide you an update that the standards for financial literacy were revised this year at the state level, and we are waiting for the draft, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, and then we will continue to work through those new standards as needed. I also wanted to share with you on the next slide the 2019-20 standard revisions. DPI now has a standard revision cycle, which we're very pleased to see. And as you can see, this year ELA, Phi Ed will start out the school year being revised, and then literacy in all subjects and mathematics will be reviewed the second half of the year. So we can expect I would anticipate a few modifications in the current standards as they reflect those changes. So then our recommendation for 2019-20 is that we maintain Wisconsin academic standards for the 2019-20 school year. And then information regarding those academic standards is posted on our website. That meets the requirement of the state, and updates will be made as necessary after the board approval this evening. Any questions?
Any questions?
Just one quick question, Sandy. The slide with the dates, was the 2010, is that the last time the standards were revised, or what does
Yes.
that represent? Okay, thank you.
And I hear, there's different districts, every district's required to do this, approve standards. What I'm curious about, how many actually draft their own standards or have deviations from the Wisconsin academic standards?
I don't know for certain. My understanding just in what I hear when I go to workshops throughout the state is probably one or two actually adopt something outside of the Wisconsin standards.
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty low percentage, and I'm sorry to spring that on you. Could have asked that question previously, and you would have been able to know the exact number, I'm sure. But still, I'll entertain a motion to approve it this time.
So moved.
Second.
Oh,
give it
that's
to Heather.
as simultaneous as it gets.
Harmonized.
We spent the whole weekend together.
So who gets the second? Well, all right, we'll give it to Heather then. All those in favor of approving the standards as recommended, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, they are approved. Moving on to Personnel Policies, Part 6. This is the first reading, and Andrea?
Yes, so this was covered in our prior work session. Be happy to go through the details of the policies if you wish, but also the summary in terms of the policy review cycle document is also updated, so you can go through the specifics. The vast majority of the policies, again, were from 1990, and many of them were deleted because they're already addressed in the handbook, which the board also approves, and we'll be viewing the 1920 handbook for certified and support at the work session coming up in the end of July.
And just for the benefit of our TV viewing audience, we got policies 535 through
546.1.
Okay.
Imagine them all flipping those in.
So exciting, yes.
So
We can go through each one of them.
We
if you
can.
like, each cha-
no, well, you did a great job at the work session, I want to say. But basically, these, like you said, they are addressed in the handbook. But what are these addressing generally, subject matter wise?
A lot of this is specific to the assignments, transfers, work schedules. One thing that we're specifically addressing in here is the resignation of professional staff, because that's a recurring issue that sometimes the board gets involved with. And so wanted some additional gravitas associated with that, which is why we're retaining that as a board policy. Some state required PD language, professional development language, and then the evaluation language is updated. Just things like that, some general topical areas when it comes to HR. But then again, anything that was deleted either conflicted with or existing handbook language, or we will be addressing it in the future handbooks.
Right. Yeah, and the reason that there's 6 parts is, I mean, again, HR just has, it's highly regulated by policy. And
Yes.
So,
And
and we have to be.
wide swath of
Right.
topics to cover.
Yeah, it's, in many of these, we don't have a choice to have a policy on or whatever, but we also need to be most up to date with our statutes. So is there a motion to approve this first reading? You have a question? Okay, go ahead.
I know I usually get a note too ahead of time.
Oh, that's fine.
On policy 535, a transfer of a staff member.
Yes.
I just had a question about that. So like in areas that are more specialized, like art, music, and so on, and of course the superintendent has the say over this, but how likely is it that you would say, like, take someone who's primarily, like, say, a high school art teacher or music or whatever, and then put them in elementary? I mean, I know from my career that if you teach art, I was supposedly able to go and teach ceramics, which, I could fumble, but I didn't really know that area.
We actually have done that as recent as a couple years ago. In order to maintain a staff member's FTE at the high school, we had them teach an elementary couple sections. But the goal there was to retain the FTE, and we did it with their permission. We'd have the conversation with them. The options are it's a partial reduction, or you maintain your FTE, but then we have to have you go travel to a school. Another situation we're doing that with is Fayed, between middle school and high school. Having some, with the reduction of the numbers at the middle school level and some realignment at the high school, we are having one of them teach some classes at the middle school. So we are looking at that, but we bring staff in, we talk to them about it. I think the most common type of transfer, which is why I put it in the policy this way, is about elementary. So we have much more of a recurring up and down in sections like this year with the resetting of the boundaries that necessitates some movement.
All right, thank you for that explanation. Is there a motion?
I move that we approve Part 6 of the 500 series that we've reviewed twice.
but this is the first reading. Your
Oh, this is
approval-
the first reading?
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
I approve the first reading.
Second discussion, but first reading.
All right. All right.
All right. Motion by Sue, second by Carrie. All those in favor of approving the first reading, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes. Last up on our agenda before we get to closed session portion is policy 425, education of homeless and children and youth. Again, Andrea, this
This is mine.
This is Aaron's
Yep.
specific policy, but we're taking it out of our usual rotation because,
Correct. So, like I talked about at the work session, this is something that came out of just a review that we need to have a policy in place. We have all of the compliance practices in place within our district, but just looking to put it into policy to make it more formal. So the only change that that was made to this since our last meeting is in that second paragraph. It used to say students of homeless individuals, and now it says children of homeless individuals.
okay. All right, is there a motion to approve?
Move to approve draft policy 425.
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing none, motion passes, and first reading of draft policy 425 is approved. Second reading of both this and Part 6 of the personnel policies will be next month.
Mr. President, I just want to say that I'm really appreciative, Aaron, that you got a policy going on this, because I only recently became aware of the fact that we do have homeless students. I was totally taken back, but yeah, I'm glad that we're running ahead of this and being prepared, so thank you.
All right, I will now entertain a motion to go into closed session. The full motion needs to be read for all three reasons for moving to closed session.
Go, Carrie, go.
Mr. President,
All right,
Board will entertain a motion to convene in closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85, Parent 1, Parent C, regarding a certified staff member's request regarding retirement benefits. B, pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85, Parent 1, Parent G, to confer with legal counsel for the school board who is rendering written advice concerning strategy to be adopted with respect to litigation in which it is likely to become involved. And C, pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85, Parent 1, Parent C, to consider the superintendent's goals and results from the 2018-19 school year.
Second.
all right, we have a motion and a second, and this requires a roll call. Bauman. Aye. Hanson, gone, so Katas.
Aye.
All right.
Katas, aye.
Loglin.
Aye.
Whitaker.
Aye.
Johnson, aye. And so we will now move to closed session.